What if Doctor Who wasn't axed in 1989? Well, that's a question I've been trying to answer for about 4 years, and we're nearly at the end. Currently we're in the mid-2010s as we grow ever closer to the present day, based now purely on 25 years of detailed, complex and convoluted canon to follow, each decision to the next through cause and effect. Let's find out what the next season has in store, thanks to a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork. Season 50 of Doctor Who would have been the second season of Chapter 4, as well as the second season for showrunner Ronald D. Moore, Doctor Samantha Bond, and companion Erin Stevenson. Unlike Season 49, Jane Espenson would not have been a co-showrunner with Moore, as she decided to work full-time showrunning the new spin-off series, The Elysium. Therefore, Ronald D. Moore had become the sole showrunner on the season, but Espenson stayed on as an executive producer. I was Stephen Bear, an executive producer of the show since 2004, decided to move on after season 49, leaving the franchise and moving on to other things, mainly focusing on his time producing a documentary about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. In Bear's absence, Ronald D. Moore was granted the position of franchise executive by the BBC and CBS, looking after Doctor Who, The Elysium, as well as any future spin-off projects or movies in the works. Ken McQuarrie stayed on as an executive producer for BBC Scotland, where the show had been since the beginning of season 49. Like season 49, the season was split into 2 parts of 8 episodes each, with the first airing from 19th of September until the 7th of November 2015, and the second half airing from the 23rd of January until the 12th of March 2016. Although The Elysium had been airing on Sunday nights, which had been a large success, the BBC chose to keep Doctor Who on Saturday nights in its traditional slot. The same decision was made with the show's aspect ratio, which remained in 16:9, despite The Elysium being produced and transmitted in 2.35 to 1. The title sequence for season 50 remained the same as season 49, with just many of the shots being swapped out for shots from season 50. The most striking difference was the fact that Ronald D. Moore's name stood alone at the end instead of sharing the screen with Jane Espenson, due to the fact that Moore was now the sole showrunner, although Espenson's name was in a different position. In addition to Erin Stevenson as the companion, Carl Harrison, who had been introduced in the first episode of season 49 as Erin's boyfriend, would join the TARDIS at the end of the first episode of season 50 as another companion for the Doctor. Hogan Cox, who had been a companion to the Doctor in the latter half of season 49, would not be making a return as a companion in the series, due to the fact that Hogan was only ever supposed to be in just 9 episodes. 2 new companions, Riley Baker Mitchell, played by Sarah Winter, and Pete Fletcher, played by Daniel Adegboyega, would make their first appearances later in the season. This episode reintroduces Erin as the 14th Doctor's companion after she left the TARDIS in the previous episode, and it also introduces Kyle, who was previously just a recurring character, as a companion too. The first act of the episode revolves around the funeral of Erin's uncle, Reg, who was seen in At the Tip of Your Fingers. The actor of Uncle Reg, David Ryle, died just before this episode was written, so writer Matthew B. Roberts included the character's death as part of the plot. For Erin, it's been about 6 months since she last saw the Doctor, and in the opening scene she telephones the Doctor asking her to come along to the funeral. However, during the service, the Doctor gets on Erin's nerves and she notices that something is very wrong with the Vicar, saying that she thinks he's a Zygon. It turns out when the Doctor does some investigating later on at the wake that the Vicar was actually being controlled by a Dalek mutant leeching onto its back, the last survivor of the Daleks after their mass ascension in the Panopticon episode of Exterminate. It initially pretends to want help from the Doctor, being a refugee, the only survivor promising not to kill anything. Naturally, the Dalek was lying and hijacks the TARDIS, giving us a segment of the episode where the Doctor and Erin are locked in the TARDIS being stalked by the Dalek mutant. The Doctor manages to lock the TARDIS controls to Earth in 1978 so the Dalek can't escape, before they get out through the makeshift TARDIS, from Bigger on the Inside from season 48, that the Doctor kept in storage. During this time we get a few scenes of Carl with Danielle and Roger as they develop the tricky relationship between the three of them, especially as we find out that he and Erin have got engaged. During these scenes, Roger says that he's happy for Carl to marry his daughter, as long as they get to spend some more time together before the wedding, so that he can train him up at being a good husband, because obviously, Roger knows the most about that. The plot climaxes as the Dalek travels to Buckingham Palace, because he saw a portrait of the Queen on the wall of the Stevensons' house and assumed that she was the most powerful person in the world. After taking a pit stop at Unit and managing to steal a Dalek casing they had in storage, the Dalek then sieges Buckingham Palace, rolling in through the front door, exterminating everyone in sight before the Dalek takes over the Queen, played by Michelle Gomez, as it plans to repopulate the Dalek race by turning humans into Daleks and using the most powerful person on the planet as its voice would make it easier. The Doctor confronts the Dalek-controlled Queen, but it goes wrong as the SAS end up tackling the Doctor to the ground and arresting her. The day is saved when Erin tricks the Dalek into taking over her, as she gambles that the Dalek would be too weak to do so without the life support of its casing. It turns out that she's right, before Carl finishes off the Dalek with a nearby sword from a display. After it's all over, the Queen offers Erin a damehood in gratitude, but Erin politely declines, saying that she's a bit of a Republican, much to Roger and Danielle's displeasure, because they really wanted Erin to accept. The episode ends with the Doctor and Erin departing in the TARDIS outside the Stevensons' home, but Carl asks whether he can come. He tells the Doctor that he and Erin have got engaged and he'd hate to see her leave to God knows what planet without him. Erin says she'd love him to come, and the Doctor says it's alright, before the TARDIS takes off and Danielle and Roger wave them goodbye. The episode finally ends with a caption just before the end credits reading, "In loving memory of David Ryle," who was of course the actor who played Uncle Reg. This episode sees Carl's first adventure in the TARDIS. Although the Doctor tries to take them to the galaxy's highest rated restaurant, they end up trapped in the seemingly 1980s hotel. When they ring the bell at the check-in counter, they find themselves confronted by three others, none of whom know how they got there. We find out that the others they were with have seemingly gone mad and are now dead. Those who remain describe the hotel as having no exits, no corridors and walls that are forever changing. As well, each room is occupied by someone or something representing their greatest fear. To top things off, the TARDIS seems to have disappeared. It turns out that a Nine-Mon is stalking the halls of the hotel, and that the hotel isn't even real but a projection onto the Nine-Mon's prison cell. The Nine-Mon was in fact dying, and brought people there to feed upon their greatest fears as a way of keeping itself alive. With the illusion broken by the Doctor, the Nine-Mon dies before the trio leave. This episode really focuses on the character of Erin and Carl, and their relationship as their deepest and darkest fears were explored. There's also a scene where the Doctor has to make Erin lose her faith in her, which really affects Erin psychologically. There is also a bit where the Doctor opens a door to see her greatest fear, but we don't quite see what it is before we cut away. This episode sees the return of Kate and Ryan and the modern-day unit team introducing Doctor Who Genesis. It's an Autumn story that focuses mainly upon plastic in the ocean, and specifically the nesting using it to weaponize the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This episode also focuses on a new character, Oliver Griffiths, played by David Thewlis, who is the Home Secretary, at least in the Doctor Who universe's 2015, and he is an advent climate change denier. He's kidnapped by Norton at the beginning of the episode, which is why Catherine calls the Doctor for help. This episode mainly plays out as a slow build, Scandi drama-like police procedural, as the Doctor, Erin and Carl try and find Oliver Griffiths and rescue him. All the while they discover what's going on with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This episode builds up to the Doctor and Carl. Erin is with Catherine investigating the plastic in the ocean, finding Oliver Griffiths in an underground base of the Nestine. However, when the Doctor asks to speak to the Nestine consciousness, a familiar voice sounds as the Master reveals himself to be the mastermind behind the whole operation, as it cuts to closing titles. The second part of The Poison Sea picks up directly where the last one left off. It mainly consists of 4 plot threads: the Doctor and the Master at the beginning of the episode, and again as they confront each other as the Doctor manages to foil his plan. The activation of the plastic in the ocean as it increases to encompass the entire ocean, and before long starts making its way onto land, consuming it. An all-out Auton attack, spearhead from space style, mannequins and everything. Finally, the Oliver Griffiths storyline, whereby he accepts that climate change exists and vows to work as part of the government to stop it, the best he can. It was revealed that the Master wanted to replace Griffiths with an Auton duplicate so he could lower all the scores in the country, as the Home Secretary is in charge of the police service, national security, MI5, etc. So the Master could do this and make everyone part of his dominion. Obviously, the Doctor foils this, and he manages to, with the help of Erin, Carl, Catherine and the rest of the unit, stop the Master and defeat the Autons. However, in the last 10 minutes of the episode, everything goes haywire as it's revealed that Catherine is under control of the Master, and he has hypnotised her. Catherine knocks the Doctor and her companions unconscious before they find themselves waking up in a woodland area with no sign of the TARDIS. The Doctor, Erin and Carl explore a little, realising that they're in the middle of the American Civil War, before we cut to the end credits and leave it on that cliffhanger. This episode picks up directly where the last one left off and sees the Doctor, Erin and Kyle stranded in September 1864 during the American Civil War. The episode mainly focuses around the real-life Battle of Fisher's Hill. Early in the runtime, the Doctor is split up from Erin and Kyle, with finding herself on the Confederate side and Erin and Kyle finding themselves on the Union side. The episode plays out as an intense war movie, teaching the audience about the events of the battle and the American Civil War in general. The Doctor acts as a healer for the Confederate side, as early in the episode their actual Doctor gets shot. Carl ends up fighting for the Union side, whereby Erin helps out as a nurse for the Union. Carl ends up being wounded and Erin has to try her best to save his life in a dramatic and tense scene, but she, with the help of the Union Doctor, manage it. On the opposite side, however, the Doctor uses a wide range of tools she has in her pocket from the future to save many of the patients, and it works. However, this begins to raise some suspicions, although none are directly raised at this point as the battle's still going on. The battle ends with the Union winning, and their soldiers march into a medical tent and find the Doctor and a few nurses. The nurses, in fear of dying and paranoia, tell them that they think the Doctor is a witch and explain their reasonings, hoping their lives will be spared as a result. The Unionist soldiers arrest the Doctor and lock her in the back of a cart on a transport to be trialled as a witch. We see Erin and Carl look on from the distance as they see the Doctor being taken away to her death, as it cuts to end credits. This episode again picks up from where the last one left off. Kinda. In fact, it opens with a caption saying 3 days later, the time the journey took by horse and cart. When the Doctor arrives at her trial, she's spoken to the sheriff of the town before she's thrown in the thieves' hole, a damp, dark, isolated prison cell underground, especially made for witches. In there, she meets a girl called Riley, played by Sarah Winter, who has also been accused of witchcraft. because she apparently apparated out of nowhere. A trial takes place and both the Doctor and Riley are found guilty. They are returned to the Thieves' Hole before their burning is to take place, whereby the Doctor finds that Riley really did apparate out of nowhere, as she's a time traveller, as she landed in the middle of the village after her vortex manipulator malfunctioned. The Doctor manages to get the vortex manipulator working again, only just charging up while they're literally being burnt, and they manage to teleport out as they are being burnt, sending the two of them to safety. Meanwhile, the episode focuses upon Erin and Carl as they firstly try and find the Doctor. They find out the town she was taken to, and this episode sees them trying to get there. However, even after they barter for transportation, they are robbed on the journey, holding them back. They have to spend a few nights at an inn along the way, and basically everything goes wrong. By the time they do reach the town, it's been a whole day late, and the villagers say they've already burnt the witches. However, they told them that some of the villagers, not many but some, are claiming that they saw the witches deapparate and escape the flames. We finish the episode with the Doctor and Riley materialising on a spaceship. This episode, like the last, splits up the action between two plotlines, firstly the Doctor and Riley, and secondly Erin and Kyle. The plotline with the Doctor and Riley sees the two of them transported to Riley's ship in orbit of Earth, but still in the same time zone. We find out the crew of the timeship were all killed by some sort of monster attacking them, and Riley only managed to escape and get out at the last moment. They soon realise that the monster, which the Doctor calls a Blaziel, is still on board the ship, and much of the episode sees the two fight them off in a standard base under siege way. The episode also reveals a lot about Riley's backstory. She explains that she's from the far future and her ship was sent back in time to record and investigate history accurately, and that they originally had a crew of 30 but the Blaziel found its way into the ship and somehow attacked them. They end up defeating the Blaziel and flushing it out into space. Erin and Carl's plot sees them settling down in 1864 over the course of many months, as they come to accept the fact that the Doctor is dead and they're going to have to live there for the rest of their lives. They start off by investigating the reports of the Doctor perhaps teleporting away, but it all comes to nothing and eventually they accept that it's a lost cause. The Civil War affects them as they find somewhere to settle, but it just becomes a fact of life and becomes normal for them. In January 1865, the two of them finally marry, and Carl does joke that they got engaged in 1978, but married in 1865. By April 1865, they know the Civil War's coming to a close and both of them are settled down as a married couple in a nice little house in a nice little town, when a slave trader from the Confederacy comes into town, much to the horrors of everyone, as slavery is certainly illegal in the United States by that point. When Erin and Carl get a good look at him, they see that he's none other than the Master. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Riley land in Washington DC in April 1865, many months later than they originally planned, as the vortex manipulator still isn't quite perfect. This episode is the big mid-season finale and a lot of stuff kicks off. Mainly this episode continues to split Erin and Carl up with the Doctor and Riley, with the two teams following two different plot threads, but they do join forces in the middle of the episode, so I'll detail each thread separately up to that point. So the Doctor and Riley land in Washington DC on the 13th of April 1865, just as the Civil War ends, and it shows them stumbling into the historical event of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. A lot of this part of the episode sees them getting used to their surroundings and meeting various players in the assassination, including the assassin, John Booth, as well as the conspirators Lewis Powell and David Herold. It's revealed during this segment of the episode that the reason Riley was sent back in time was to change history so the assassination failed, to which the Doctor is appalled as they have a large argument. Meanwhile, Erin and Carl deal with the Master, who they confront, and they find out the events of Destiny the Guides happened after the Poison Sea, and the Master's TARDIS in that story is actually the Doctor's TARDIS which he stole. He is still illegally selling slaves as the Civil War ends, but he's hypnotising people not to care and to buy them. Erin and Carl learn that the Master is planning to change history so that the plot to assassinate several key figures in the United States government is successful and restarts the Confederate campaign. The two plot lines merge when Erin and Carl follow the Master to DC, where they run into the Doctor and Riley. After a touching reunion scene, and both of the pairs getting each other up to speed, the third act ensues as the race is on to foil the Master's plan. All the while, Riley has an ulterior motive to save Abraham Lincoln as well, despite her promising that she wouldn't do such a thing to the Doctor. The rest of the episode sees the quartet foil the Master's plan, and the Doctor takes him prisoner on the TARDIS, locking him away in a cell deep inside the ship. Riley tries to save Abraham Lincoln, but Erin speaks to her, telling her what Hogan did in Waters of Mars the previous season, and persuades her not to. Riley then decides that to do such a thing is wrong, much to the Doctor's delight, and history goes as planned. At the end of the episode, the Doctor invites Riley to join her, Erin and Carl in the TARDIS, and while she accepts with great delight, Erin and Carl tell the Doctor they wish to remain there in 1865. The Doctor's confused as to why they want to leave, but Erin explains that over the past few months they built a life for themselves, got married, and she says there's a baby on the way, which even Carl is shocked about as he didn't know. The Doctor accepts this and gives them a mobile phone, telling them that if they ever need her, or if she ever needs them, that will ring. The Doctor says her goodbyes to Erin and Carl in a very emotional scene before she and Riley depart in the TARDIS. Finally, we see the Master in his cell on board the TARDIS screaming before cutting to end credits. This would be the final story before the mid-season break, and it would therefore end with a 60-second trailer for the second half of the season starting on the 23rd of January 2016. Even though Riley's a companion, she isn't credited as one until the second half of the season, as with Hogan in Those Who Lead Part 1. Riley is just credited as a normal guest star in episodes 6 through 8. Also notable, that the Stranded arc, lasting from episodes 4 to 8, is the longest amount of serialisation since season 45. The season 45 of Fear. In the next instalment, or What If Doctor Wasn't Axed, I'll be going through season 50 part 2, episodes 9 through 16, so until then, goodbye.